Hi. Today I'm going to be telling you about how a computer works, its parts, and how they work together in order to make the computer do all the things that we do on it. So here we go. We're going to start out with the peripherals. These are the accessories or tools used to operate the device, usually a computer. It includes things like speakers, headphones, external hard drives, and more. Obviously, I put the most important things like the mouse, keyboard, and monitor there for you. Um, that is pretty much all there is to peripherals. They're just the tools that are used to manipulate the device outside of like the hardware. The next biggest thing is the case. That is the actual housing unit of the computer. So the computer is all of the guts inside of that case, and the case is merely one houses it and two ventilates it so that air can get through and keep it all cool. You'll see I got some designs here. This one is actually pretty similar to the one that I have. This one is more of like a normal one too. And then these are like some of the crazier ones right here. And you'll see here, this is actually one of the older styles. You'll see in like these ones, they have the battery more covered and they don't have it in this one. And this is also more for like, if you have more CD drives, which isn't as popular now. So you don't see that as often. So the actual computer parts. We'll start off with the motherboard. This is the control center for the computer. It transmits all of the information from each part to each other, and also the power from the power unit to the rest of the parts. We'll talk more about that later. Here we have a breakdown of all of the parts that we're really going to be talking about and where they plug in. So obviously the motherboard is a lot more intricate and detailed than this, but these are the main parts that will be necessary in order to have a basic working computer. So as you can see here, we have the RAM slots, which we'll talk about all this later. The motherboard power connector, that's where the power would plug in. The CPU and the CPU fan goes right here. The SATA and HDD connectors, so that your storage would go here and plug in here. These are your GPU slots, so your graphics card. Those would plug in here, and then your CPU power plugs in up here. This is diagrammed from my own motherboard, so every motherboard from every company is their own kind of deal. They all are laid out differently, although the majority of them follow the same kind of layout. For the most part, they have different quirks and different spacing and layouts. So that's the motherboard. It kind of acts like the reason I have this picture of the phone operator is it, like I said, transmits information from one point to another like a phone operator would, essentially. Next up, we have the CPU. So that's right here where this was. The CPU, I have a little brain here. It acts as it's the central processing unit and acts as the brain of the computer. It's what runs all of the processes and applications and all of the information inside of your computer. So any process that's happening, opening an application, opening your files, watching a video, that is all done through the CPU, processing that information and then distributing it through the rest of the system. This is getting a little bit more into it, but different CPUs have different amounts of cores. And essentially that just means that the more that it has, the better your computer will be at multitasking. This is the back part of the CPU, by the way. This is the top. The reason I put AMD/Intel, those are the two biggest brands for them, and pretty much you'll only see those type of CPUs, as far as I have been concerned. Next up, we have the RAM. That is the random access memory is what that stands for. It is a temporary memory used to store information about currently running processes. So essentially, you see here I have the notebook next to it. This memory acts as a temporary memory, like a notebook when you're doing a math problem, so that the CPU can write all of its information down onto that temporarily so it can complete the process. So essentially, like I said, it's just scratch space for the CPU to do its job. The more RAM that you have, the easier it will be for the CPU to do its job. And they come in sizes of 4, 8, 16, 32, and 64 gigabytes. So the CPU and the RAM work really closely together. I mean, they all work really closely together, but these two especially. Next up, we have the HDD and the SDD. These are both of your storage devices. So HDD stands for hard disk drive, and SSD, stands for solid state drive. They are different types of storage with different uses as well as different price points, which is the biggest difference I would say between the two of them. So HDD is a physical disk that it actually writes the information onto, like it would any other CD. Which means it often takes longer than SSD to write or recall its information. The HDD, the hard disk drive, is usually a lot cheaper and comes in larger sizes than the SSD because of its drawbacks. It can be in a bulkier form with more space, and oftentimes it's cheaper because it is bulkier and slower than an SSD. Moving on to the SSD, it uses flash memory as opposed to the written physical memory, meaning there is no moving parts. It's way more compact. So it plugs directly into your motherboard, where the HDD is stored away from the motherboard, and plugged in separately. The SSD is faster, has 0 parts, and is obviously more compact. So there are definitely different drawbacks and advantages to both, and most systems have both, including mine. Next up, we have the GPU. The GPU, or the graphics processing unit, is a processor that works specifically with visual data. It essentially means it's taking on the task from the CPU of processing and displaying visuals, because it is way more suited to the task. GPUs are not necessary for a computer, as most motherboards now have onboard graphics cards. Although it is definitely welcomed in most builds where you're going to be doing anything other than just like business or like office work. Due to it assists in processing speed. That is because the GPU breaks up the information differently than a CPU, meaning it only takes in like the visual data, allowing it to take on the brunt of the task of displaying visuals. I think that's pretty much all there is on a graphics card. Next up, we have the power unit. It does exactly what its name sounds like it does. It supplies power to the rest of the computer. As you can see here, we got a little switch. They all have that, and they all have a little plug-in, so you can plug it into, like, from the back of the computer to your wall. And then here we have a fan, because it gets really, really hot inside there. I'm sure you notice a lot of these have fans in them to keep them cooled, as well as the fans inside the case. And then here, obviously, is where all of the cords come out, and these will plug in back to our motherboard in slots like this, here, here. You get the picture. And so that's pretty much it. The power unit just supplies power to the rest of the system. And that is all the basics of a computer. You only need like those 8 parts in order to have a working computer, plus your peripherals, of course, in order to have a working computer. It may not be your best computer ever. I will say that. If you skip out on the GPU or one of those storage devices, or obviously each of these parts have different price points and valuability and strengths and weaknesses. So everything is very customizable, but that is essentially what you need for the basics of a computer. Thank you.